Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends, because I have a great guest coming on. You know, we look at the United States today. A lot of it seems dysfunctional. It seems like the moral fabric is dropping off a cliff. And a lot of it has to do with the lack of faith within our society, how American society has been transformed. And I can think of no better guest to bring on than Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager has a new book out, the Rational Bible series, looks at the book of Numbers, God and man in the wilderness. Mr. Prager, thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I have a boring answer. I'm always good. I am. I'm one of the luckiest human beings I know. So normally people just say fine when they're asked how they are, but I give you a little speech.
Well, it should be that way. I mean, I think that every morning when I wake up and my eyes open, it's a good day. I'm awake. I'm alive.
That's
and
right.
I think too often we focus on the negative aspects of life. And I could understand why. Life can be difficult at times. But you wrote this book, the Rational Bible series, so that people try and understand it. I mean, one of the main things is about faith. And I'm a Roman Catholic, so we're told that we're supposed to have this faith that exists, faith and faith alone. You argue that reason and faith can come together. Can you explain that to the audience, how you reconcile?
Yeah, good. I'm glad you asked. I actually have an even more direct view. It's not so much, although it's true, of course, reason and faith go together. My own view for my own life, and whoever wishes to respond positively can, is it is reason that leads me to faith. It's not simply that they can work together. It is that I wouldn't have faith were it not for reason. I don't have any trans-rational faith. My faith in God is not because, I believe in God. Reason tells me there is a God. Reason tells me there is a creator. Reason tells me that the death of the Judeo-Christian value system in the West is going to mean the end of the West, because the West was founded on that. If you remove the foundation, you could be an atheist and say this. I'll give you an example. Douglas Murray is one of the greatest thinkers living today, in my opinion. Douglas Murray is an agnostic. He is not a member of any religion. And he agrees 100% that the death of the biblical religions in the West is the end of the West. You don't have to be, you can be an atheist. He's an agnostic. You can be an atheist and understand that. So it's not for me. That's why I call it the Rational Bible. I write in the introduction to each volume. It's a 5-volume commentary on the first 5 books. This is the 4th. There's one left, Leviticus. So I write in the introduction to each of the 5 volumes. If anything I say does not comport with reason, I have failed. I believe everything in this is about the Torah, the first 5 books, and both the Old and New Testaments are based on the Torah. Everything comes from there. The Garden of Eden, creation, the 10 Commandments, love God, love your neighbor. It is all there. And if you don't know those 5 books, you can't know the Bible. So I am explaining them. I know biblical Hebrew pretty much like I know English, and that has been a tremendous help. But what I'm trying to do is make a rational case for the magnificent lessons of each of the 5 books.
And I think that's so important, because obviously as human beings, we're constantly filled with some sense of doubt, especially when times get difficult, especially when hopelessness tends to kick in. People may either gravitate towards faith, or they may actually move away from faith. So what are your thoughts in regards to what we're seeing in our society, where the amount of people that have some faith has plummeted. I mean, you go to churches, the pews are empty. It's sad when I go to church and I see the pews empty. Americans are moving away from God. They're moving away from the Judeo-Christian society. What's your thoughts, and how does it impact the family unit?
Yeah.
How does it impact the
Well,
broader societal structure?
it impacts everything. Look, uh, 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 it's so ironic you should ask this. My last column, I have literally 1,000 columns.
And this is at DennisPrager.com. People can find it,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Well, it's all over the place, but it's certainly at DennisPrager.com. And it was how the secular keep me religious. And people would love this column because it's the truth. If the secular world produced wisdom and goodness, I don't know how religious I would be. The most powerful single impetus for my staying religious is realizing there is no alternative that leads to wisdom and goodness. And by the way, goodness is not possible without wisdom, because good intentions don't mean a damn thing if you don't have wisdom. 80 million people were killed by communists in the 20th century, and many of the communists had good intentions, equality, for example. Whether or not that's a good intention is a separate subject. I want to address as well, when you spoke about the empty pews, I have brought a lot of people to religion. In fact, this will blow your mind, but it's either true or not true. I believe that I have brought more people back to church than any living Christian, and I'm a Jew, just for the record. And I'm not saying it to boast. I'm saying it to make a point. Why have I been effective in changing people's minds from secular to Bible-centered and God-centered? And here is my modus operandi, my mode of operation. I rarely argue for faith in God. I argue for the necessity of God. Life doesn't work. Society doesn't work without the Bible and God. And then people listened. Because let's say I convince people there's a God. How do you know it'll make any difference in their lives if they don't know what is significant about God? This is where Jews, Catholics, and Protestants have failed. They haven't made the case for the necessity of their religion, of the Bible. They made the case for faith, but not the case for necessity. So the society won't survive without the biblical bases that made our society possible. And since I began lecturing in my 20s, and I said at the time when I would lecture that Americans didn't teach kids how to be American or why to be American. Christians didn't teach their kids why to be Christian, and Jews didn't teach their kids why to be Jewish. They just assumed inertia would take over. I go to church, my kid will go to church. Doesn't work that way. They didn't know how to answer the great question, why is it so important?
Dennis, we got to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want you to explain to the audience why that's so important. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So Dennis, before the break, you were talking and explaining how Americans never taught Americans how to be American, that Christians never taught Christians how to be Christian, that a lot of parents out there just thought their children would simply pick it up. They'd follow the same traditions and customs that they did. So can you explain to the audience why it's so important that you have this type of involvement?
Or as Dostoevsky put it in one sentence in Brothers Karamazov, where there is no God, all is permitted. There is no good and evil if there is no God. There are only opinions about good and evil. How many people tell their kids that? Do you know that good and evil are equivalent to tasty and not tasty?
Yeah.
There is no difference. If there is no God who says there is good and evil, there is no good and evil. There are just opinions about it. All morality becomes subjective, silly putty, which is what we have now. Only secular people say men give birth. You know a religious Christian Jew or Protestant or Catholic who says men give birth? I never met one.
No, neither have I. In fact, the FBI looks at traditional Catholics as potential domestic violent extremists because they only believe in two genders.
Yes. And the Los Angeles Dodgers can mock the Catholic Church, and the Olympics can mock the Last Supper, and nothing happens.
It really is amazing when we look at what's happened in our society. And you pointed out something that was important before about communists and Marxism. Those societies push this notion of equity throughout their societies. And when it comes to Marxism, one of the first things they do is they try to ban organized religion, organized faith within their societies, because there could be no higher entity than the state. The state has to be the ultimate authority. Are you concerned that America is trending in that direction, albeit not as overtly?
I'm not, I'm beyond concerned, and it is overt. Of course, I can give example after example. You either will get your rights and and moral authority will either come from God and the Bible or from the state. That's it. The smaller the Bible, the bigger the state. The bigger the state, the smaller the Bible. By the way, the bigger the state, the smaller everything. The smaller the parent. In my state of California, a very insidious thing happened. The state has decided it will give children both breakfast and lunch at school. As soon as it was announced, I said, there's an insidious agenda here. Kids, your parents don't feed you, the state does. And
that's a great point.
I know, exactly. And it's true for everything. The Democratic Party, years ago, I was there at Democratic National Convention about, 20 years ago. People could look it up. I think it's still on the internet. The Life of Julia. It was a cartoon that they showed at the convention. I saw it.
I remember that.
Oh, so perfect. Good. I'm glad you do, because people, realize I'm not exaggerating here. They have a whole cartoon about a girl. She's born. She goes into adolescence, to a young adulthood, old age. Her whole life, she is taken care of by the state, by the government. There is no man in her life. No one, not a father, not a husband, no one. She doesn't need anyone. She has the state. The state has supplanted husbands. The state has supplanted parents. The state has supplanted God. That is the left. That is what they do. And people buy it. And it's in my current commentary, the one coming out now. People could pre-order it. They'll have it for Christmas. It's called the Book of Numbers. In Hebrew, it's In the Wilderness, a much better title. But it's a phenomenal book. It's the fourth book of the Bible. And sure enough, it's got this incredible story. The Israelites leave Egypt, and what is the first thing they do? They complain. What do they complain? We want to go, literally, this is their wording. We want to go back to Egypt. The food was better. This is so relevant. Everything in it is relevant to our day. The point is that people do not yearn to be free. That is a myth. People yearn to be taken care of, and they will trade in liberty for being taken care of. And that is why the left wins all over the world, because they make this, it's a diabolical trade. You give me your liberty, we'll give you free healthcare, we'll give you free education, we'll give you free daycare, we'll give you free tuition.
It's funny that you actually bring that up, because I was saying that exact thing to my students this morning, that the concepts of liberty and freedom, these ideas are American political philosophies. They don't exist all over the world. It's not like they're culturally compatible with everyone, that these were American concepts. And if you don't understand the concepts, you can't appreciate the concepts. And that leads to dependency on the state, the government. Now, Dennis, we need to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to talk to you about that government dependency. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about the growing dependency on the state. And one of the things to me is self-reliance, personal responsibility, that equals liberty. When it comes to dependency on the state, aren't you just a slave to the state?
That's my point. The Jews leaving Egypt said we prefer being slaves with good food. And that is what all people who vote left are saying. We prefer to be slaves if you give us good food. That is the human condition in a nutshell. Only a few people say what Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death.
Yeah, people prefer
Most people
stability.
say, give me liberty or free health care.
Well, that's the thing. The natural human condition is to prefer stability. You're willing to cede all your liberties. And we saw it during the coronavirus, right? You want to feel safe. And it's only an illusion that they could provide, but it's successful. And the Democrats, they're not quiet about it. You said it's very overt. It is. Remember when President Biden said that when children are in the classroom, they belong to the teacher, not the parent? Randy Weingarten said the same thing. Terry McAuliffe down in Virginia, when he was running for governor, said essentially the same thing, that parents should have no role in education. But here in New York State, we're voting on Prop 1 November 5th. And it's literally about taking away parental rights that the state gets to determine. And if you don't sit there and listen to your child about what gender they want to be, well, then the state can get involved. Even though we have plenty of laws about discrimination on the books that date all the way back to the last constitutional convention, 1930s here in New York State, yet this is what's going on. And it's not just going on in blue states, though. We're seeing it in red states as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely. This is a perfect segue to a thought I have about the Ten Commandments. And I write about the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy and Exodus because the Ten Commandments appear twice in the Bible, twice in the Torah, those two books. So people have often, all of my life, because they know my motto, if you want to defund the police, you can do it. Just have everybody live by the Ten Commandments. That's really all we need. That's how good they are. So I've been asked often, so what do you think is the most important commandment, Dennis? And at different times in my life, I had a different answer. For the last at least 10 years, my answer is honor your father and mother. Because I realize—
That's mine with my two little kids.
You tell them, or what were you saying?
I tell them, I'm like, that's one of the most important commandments is honor thy mother and father when they're starting to give lip back.
Yeah, exactly. It might be the most, and I'll tell you why. Relating to what you just said before, all dictatorships, all tyrannies, the first thing they do is undermine parental authority. The great antidote to tyranny is parental authority, and they all know it. In Nazi Germany, they had the Hitler Youth. Your allegiance is to Hitler and the party. In the Soviet Union, it was to Stalin and the party, not to your parents. The parents are nothing. The further left you go, the further totalitarian, and virtually all totalitarianism is left wing, you undermine parental authority. Yeah,
in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, students were told to report to their teachers if their parents said anything bad about Saddam.
Yes, in every tyranny. That is
exactly during COVID, you had governors telling during Thanksgiving break, the governor of Vermont, who was a Republican, actually, who basically said that schools have to ask the children what they did for Thanksgiving break, how many people came into home to see if COVID orders were being violated. And I'm like, that's terrifying. This is the United States of America. It's not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And yet here we have politicians and public health officials that were pushing that exact thing that you're saying.
That's why, as I point out in both Deuteronomy and Exodus, when discussing the Ten Commandments, the only commandment that lists a reward is honor your father and mother so that you will live long on the land that I give you. No society will survive the breakdown of parental authority.
And sadly, here in the United States, we're seeing the breakdown of the family unit in general, where, it's pushing nearly 50%, and maybe over at 50% at this point, are born in single parent households. Some parents aren't involved in their child's life. And in this day and age, parents, listen, life is hard. Even if you do come from a two-parent household, both parents are usually working, hardly have a home, and so they don't spend as much quality time as they should and need to with their children. So, we've seen the Bible endure for thousands of years since human history. How do you think that we could bring it back, make it where people today, the American people today, have an appreciation and understanding of the Judeo-Christian values that built this society? But we are seeing a change. There are many that scream about the separation of church and state, and that faith has no business within our society. So, Dennis, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we get back, I want to take that up with you, see what your thoughts are. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. So, Dennis, how do you handle the skeptics? The people that are out there that say, look, we have a separation of church and state, which is actually never written in our original documents, the founding documents of this country. But when you have these skeptics that say faith plays no role within society, that it shouldn't be within our society, How do you push back against that?
I can tell you my method, and it has been effective. And this Bible commentary is one in my arsenal of things that I use by explaining to people that no alternative works. That's the
What comes next will be far worse.
there's no comparison and you know of course there have been failings in the Judeo-Christian world. There's no question about it because human beings are flawed. But the alternative, what are the alternatives? There are none of them work. As I point out just in this column, and of course in my commentary, the most absurd institutions, those that most reject moral norms and wisdom, are the most secular institutions. They're called universities. I mean, when you have faculty and students pro-Hamas, I mean, Hamas is today's Nazis. They announce we want to exterminate the Jews. And you have massive demonstrations and you have massive support for the idea that America was founded in 1619 to be a racist country. It's systemically racist. I mean, and of course, that's where they came up with the idea men give birth.
Yeah, well, the intent is clear. I mean, I've written extensively about the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist protests we're seeing on college campuses. It's an embarrassment to my profession. It's more profession, and it's more embarrassing that professors are engaging in this. And right. College administrators shouldn't get tongue-tied. It shouldn't be difficult to condemn a Hamas, a brutal terrorist organization that slaughters innocent civilians. And we should all condemn an education system that actually promotes anti-Americanism. And they've been doing that for years to try and create a bunch of activists, the next generation of activists, to push this country further to the left. So bringing it to November 5th, what are your thoughts on November 5th? How do you see this playing out? And do you think that rational, sane Americans are going to step up, speak out, and essentially say, we've had enough of this woke nonsense going on?
I have no idea. I never make predictions.
Me neither.
It's not only don't I make predictions, I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic about the American future, because I don't find that either optimism or pessimism helps. The pessimist doesn't fight because he says things will turn out lousy. The optimist doesn't fight because he thinks things will turn out great. I only care if people fight. I don't care if you're an optimist or a pessimist. I don't care about your predictions or mine. All I care is, are you sitting on the sidelines while the greatest experiment in liberty and decency in national history is dying? That's
so better question. Are you disappointed in the American people that
yes,
too many have remained silent?
That is correct. In fact, you're one of the only interviewers I've had that has asked that question, because that is the logical upshot. And I have to say that I now feel that much of my life I have sort of romanticized the American people. And there are many great Americans. There's no question about it. But that half of the American people might vote for people who are okay with men who say they're women competing in women's sports, that's really mind-blowing. And they call themselves feminists. That they're okay with the party that closed schools down for 2 years, ruined the education and lives of millions of American kids when there was no excuse to do so. And by the way, this is not Monday morning quarterbacking. People could see on the internet, I wrote in April 2020 that lockdowns were the greatest international mistake in human history.
Yeah, it was a travesty. I mean, I used to be in emergency management. I worked on the New York State pandemic plan and the Suffolk County pandemic plan, and that was tossed out the window. They didn't follow one thing that I worked on with a team of virologists and epidemiologists, and shutting the schools down for nearly 2 years is criminal, in my opinion. Keeping kids masked up from the ages of keeping anyone masked up is criminal. But really, when they put it on children, it was disgraceful. And it was all about obedience and compliance to see how far they could push. And they succeeded. You know, you have the young generation that's supposed to rebel against the system that lost 2 years, had 2 years of their lives stolen from them. They complied with no pushback. Grown men complied with no pushback. Even if they disagreed with it, they didn't push back at all. And I agree. I share in your disappointment. I share in that with the way that you romanticized the American people and the grit that we used to have 40 years ago. That never would have happened in the United States, but now it has. And I think it's because we've grown soft. We've had it relatively easy in my lifetime, especially, and things have been relatively good. But when things get uncomfortable, let's see.
I want your viewers and listeners to look at the big picture here, or one aspect of it. You and I have virtually everything in common. You're a Catholic, I'm a Jew. I can't even imagine a position about society where we would differ. I learned so early in my life the difference in America was not between Jews and Christians. It was between religious and secular. And they're fine. There are obviously some wonderful secular people, but the overwhelming divide is those who take the Bible seriously and those who think you don't need one, that the New York Times becomes your Bible.
And that's what we say, God help us, if that's the case, where the New York Times becomes your Bible.
Well, yeah, that's right. Although I would put it in my rational way, we need to help God.
Yeah, it's a great point. Dennis, I really appreciate you coming on. Everyone needs to check out.
I hope people will get the Rational Bible.
Oh, well, we're going to have links up to the Rational Bible series on the PAS Report. So go to PASreport.com. Make sure you visit DennisPrager.com. Make sure you go to PragerU. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you come back.
Yes, I would love it. Thanks a million.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.